More mileage doesn't just stress your legs, it stresses your gut. And if you don't account for that, your race won't just fall apart because of fitness, it'll fall apart because of digestion. It's estimated that 30 to 50% of endurance athletes experience one or more gastrointestinal symptoms during competition or training. And that's anywhere from reflux, bloating, nausea, to urgent toilet sprints and diarrhea. So if that's happened to you, you're not alone. But the thing is, as mileage increases, so does your risk. And if you've been tuning into these episodes for a while, you'll know that I am currently training for my next marathon, 42.2 kilometers to be specific, in Milan, Italy, on April 12th, 2026. And I trust many of you tuning in are active folks, and I have many people in my community who do run as well. So I know that this probably has a special connection to you, but most of you, want to break free from gut symptoms like IBS, bloating, pain, and urgency, while also fueling your active lifestyle. And many of you do engage in endurance sports and strength training. So right now, as I'm building towards that April 12th marathon, my weekly mileage is really climbing. It's actually peaking this week at the time of the recording. And I'm running 2 quality workouts per week while also layering in a little bit of prep for an upcoming High Rocks in Ottawa in May, which is doubles. So the training is pretty intense right now. But my priority this build isn't just pace or fitness, it's also protecting my gut and preventing injury while volume increases. And as endurance athletes, we're dealing with repetitive mechanical stress, reduced blood flow to the GI tract during long runs, fueling demands that push tolerance limits, and also cumulative recovery strain. So if we don't proactively support our recovery and digestive systems, they will push back. So in today's episode, I'm going to walk you through how I plan to keep my gut happy and prevent injury while marathon training. We'll walk through how I'm structuring my training, why endurance athletes are uniquely vulnerable to digestive issues, and the specific nutrition and recovery strategies I'm using and that I also teach my one-on-one clients to keep my gut happy and body resilient heading into race day. So if you're an active individual who wants to fuel your performance without sacrificing digestive comfort, this episode is going to be directly applicable to you. Let's get into it. As mentioned, first, let's go into my training structure. So I'll walk you through this and what this looks like. So the first aspect of it has been building mileage slowly. So I've been running consistently for the last 2.5 years. And my last full marathon was actually 2 years ago in March of 2024, the Rome Marathon, also in Italy. And since then, and until now, I focused a lot on my 5K race training and also put in some great training blocks for a few half marathon races. I've done some 10Ks and trail races as well. All that to say, I've really gradually built up my weekly mileage pretty slowly and steadily over time, as well as the ability to handle 2 workout runs per week. So this means doing interval tempo, fast speed style runs in addition to those easy runs. So I'm really glad that I didn't jump into a second marathon right away, as I feel like I wouldn't have been able to maybe get to the level I'm at now, almost running 90-kilometer weeks with 2 workouts per week in addition to easy runs, just because I don't think that, not taking the time to get there would have helped maybe, lower my injury risk as well. So I'm pretty happy with this. And one thing that I had gone through was this recurring nerve issue during my training the past 2 years. So that set me back a little bit in terms of mileage. So I'd rather be cautious and build up my training more slowly to allow my body to handle more over time rather than go hard and burn out and sort of have these like highs and lows in terms of mileage. And I really believe that slow and steady is really the best way rather than trying to go out too hard and expect like really fast results or your body to catch up super quickly. For those watching, I'm going to pin up a graph of my weekly mileage for the last 3 months from Strava so you can see the steady building increase in mileage and really the consistency. So as I mentioned at the time of recording, I'm now getting up to about almost 90 kilometers this week, and I've been holding steady around 80 for the last few weeks and running 2 runs per week as workouts, with Sunday being a long run workout. My one this week will be around 34 kilometers with about an hour at marathon pace, which is a more moderate effort for me. And then the other workout run of the week, which is typically on Thursdays for me, is now more so a speed workout. It had been also tempo or more half marathon or 10K pacing. And on top of this, I also do 2 strength workouts per week, which we'll chat about a little bit later. Plus, I try to get a bit of cross training. I've brought that down a little bit since I've been getting the mileage up, but doing things like elliptical and rowing, or sometimes getting to a spin class or indoor bike, has really helped me also get more aerobic stimulus without adding extra stress to my joints and tendons with additional running. And honestly, this is the best that I've ever felt with training, because I think part of it is just really building up gradually and allowing my body to adapt over time and not trying to do too much too soon. Really just changing one thing per week, whether that's adding a little bit of mileage or increasing the intensity or the number of workouts. So definitely slow and steady wins the race. As I mentioned too, I'm strength training twice per week. This has been pretty consistent with me. Sometimes if I have more time, I might do 3 times a week, or if I'm not as running as much a week, I might add a bit more. But it's so important for running. You really can't just be a runner alone. You need to be doing strength training. One, just to make sure that you are maintaining muscle mass and you're maintaining strength, but also there are so many great exercises and ones that will help to prevent injury, and wherever you may have weak spots, to help you to just be a better runner and also feel better. And I know for me, it's something that I know is just important for longevity and health. And I've always strength trained. I've been strength training for 15 years. So it's definitely something that complements my running, but I also love doing it because muscle mass is so important and it helps keep back pain away, helps with posture, so many different things. As I mentioned, I also have a Hyrox competition on the calendar. Thankfully, I'm only doing a mixed doubles, so I will have a little bit of break during the race. I have done a singles before, which I should do an upcoming episode on, but stay tuned for that, or may do one on the mixed doubles. But I do have that event coming up. I'm kind of saying that's more for fun. So the marathon is like my A race, which I'm really prioritizing my efforts towards. But with the Hyrox in mind, about a month after my upcoming marathon, I'm adding in some Hyrox specific exercises and strength work just to make sure that I am still preparing for that. So things like deep squats to support wall balls, farmer's carry, which is direct exercise in Hyrox, walking lunges, which is another direct exercise, also keeps the legs and quads strong for running, broad jumps, and hand release push-ups. And another thing I'd like to add is whenever I do work out, I like to work out without shoes and just in socks. And this helps keep my feet and ankles work more. And keeping these areas strong also helps reduce and lower injury risk too. And finally, as I mentioned, cross training is important to me too. So keeping elliptical, rowing, and or biking in during the week allows me to get more aerobic work in without the impact of running. This has really been a game changer for me. So when I have dealt with a nerve issue flare up, so basically I have a nerve that kind of gets tight in my mid-low back, and it has in the past caused some hip pain just as a function of doing a lot of strength training and just things getting tight back there. I've had to pull back the running, even take like a few days off of running. But if that happens, then I know I can always use the elliptical or the bike to make sure I still get in aerobic stimulus. And it definitely is effective. I actually ran one of my half marathon personal best after about 8 weeks of doing mostly spin bike and little running. So it's definitely very effective. And it also, as I mentioned, is another good way to get in that aerobic stimulus without putting extra stress on the joints. So that is the training side of things that has helped me to prevent injury risk and also build that mileage more slowly. I will also caveat that I do have an amazing running coach who helps keep me on track with a plan, and I know exactly what I should be doing each week or where I should maybe modify if something comes up, even the weather changes or depending on how I'm feeling or recovery. So that definitely just goes towards having someone else who can support you in something that you're not an expert in. I'm not an expert on the best running workouts to be doing for my goals or exactly how I should be splitting my week. So it's definitely effective to have a coach. And I always say coaches need coaches too. So I support a lot of clients in my practice here at Gut Fit Nutrition, and I work with a lot of clients and I love my clients, but I would say it's also been really valuable for me to have a coach myself within the running aspect and helping me with the training, just to have someone else to be accountable to or someone else that's checking into me. So it's definitely been really amazing and also helping to support my balance with training too. So let's get into more around the nutrition and gut side of things, which is what I'm assuming you're mainly tuning in for today. So what's the connection between digestive issues and endurance athletes? So as I mentioned earlier, it's no surprise athletes training for and competing in endurance events are most at risk for gastrointestinal or GI issues, with 30 to 50% of athletes reporting one or more symptoms, both upper GI symptoms like reflux, nausea, indigestion, heartburn, and lower GI symptoms like cramping, bloating, diarrhea, abdominal pain. And it is highest risk for prolonged, so greater than 90 minutes, as well as weight-bearing type exercises like running are really associated with a greater number and severity of symptoms. So that means, yes, marathons runners and long distance runners are at higher risk for exercise-induced GI symptoms. One reason for this, as I alluded to before, is a change in splanchnic blood flow. So this refers specifically to our internal organs, especially within the abdomen. So our stomach, liver, intestine, pancreas, spleen, which get essentially what's known as ischemia. So there is a reduced blood flow to them, so there's less movement. And this exercise-induced ischemia can lead to what's known as a systemic endotoxemia, so release of these sort of toxins within the gut and an associated inflammatory response. So this can lead to sort of the development of some of those symptoms and our gut being more sensitive when we're engaging in that prolonged or high intensity training like running or like speed or interval type workouts. That being said, we know that actually the symptoms that occur during exercise as a result of these physiological changes are for the most part short-term, and they don't have any long-term or negative consequences. And we know that exercise is actually great for the gut. So things like low to moderate intensity exercise, walking, cycling, yoga has been shown to help improve conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, GERD or reflux disease, inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. But conversely, those with those conditions do have a higher risk of having these exercise-induced GI symptoms. That being said, it's not inevitable that you will have these symptoms, and there are several strategies that we know work based on the literature. And as you should know by now, this is something that I help clients with, as well as practice for myself, and I will be practicing, and I have been practicing for my upcoming race. So what works? We'll go into this a little bit deeper, but basically we know that nutritional strategies to help prevent gastrointestinal issues during endurance training like running include the right hydration and fluid balance, so preventing dehydration and preventing an influx of too much sodium or too much carbs in the gut that can mess up how our gut reacts, incorporating the low FODMAP diet, so it's not just for IBS explicitly, but it may be helpful for endurance athletes. Adjusting our fiber and our fat content around training, as well as something known as gut training, which is sort of practicing how we feel before, during, and after hard or prolonged efforts to prepare our gut and train it to better handle things like higher carbohydrate intake. So let's go into these a little bit more and what that looks like for me specifically. So the first one is prioritizing low FODMAP, low fiber, and low fat around and during long runs and workouts. So to perform well, we need to fuel up properly around our training. Like there's no surprise there. And I always ensure I fuel up, especially for long runs and harder workouts, because these are obviously going to require more fuel, but they are going to be more intense on the gut. So to help prevent gut symptoms, something that I prioritize are these three things, or the three Fs: low fat, low fiber, and low FODMAP. Why fat and fiber? Well, these nutrients, while they are important for us, we need fat for fat-soluble nutrient absorption. It helps food taste better. And then we also need fiber because it's important for our microbiome. No surprise, I've talked about this on previous episodes. If you know me by now, I'm a big fan of fiber. However, fiber does delay stomach emptying, and it does or it is fermented by our gut bacteria and could cause more gas production. So consuming these close to exercise is not ideal for these reasons, just because our gut is under a lot of stress, there's reduced blood flow, and it's not well equipped to handle these types of nutrients. Now, the other layer to this I mentioned are FODMAPs. So you might be a little familiar around avoiding fat and fiber close to workouts, but FODMAPs are another thing that I consider in my training as well. Obviously, I work with this a lot. I am trained by Monash University in the low FODMAP diet, and I work with a lot of IBS clients specifically to help them work through the low FODMAP diet process to help improve their IBS symptoms like bloating, pain, urgency, and bowel movements. That said, I get a lot of runners and endurance athletes who have IBS or suspected IBS, as well as a lot of people come to me who have dealt with a lot of extreme gut issues during their runs or endurance training. So they may not explicitly have IBS outside of things, but they do have a history of GI symptoms during endurance training. So I think that based on the current research that we have, this diet's actually applicable for all of those groups. And it's something that I incorporate in practice because I do have the specific training in it, as well as the knowledge of sports nutrition and fueling, and kind of blending those together to really help my athletes and my clients get the best management for their symptoms, whether it's IBS specifically day to day, as well as those GI symptoms during training. So FODMAPs stand for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And they are essentially fermentable carbohydrates that are broken down by the bacteria in our large bowel, and they can cause more gas buildup in the small intestine. And research has shown that limiting FODMAPs around hard training and endurance events can help prevent GI issues for endurance athletes. So some examples of low FODMAP type carbohydrates that I like to include around training would be brown rice or gluten-free pasta made from quinoa, rice, or corn. I also love potatoes, things like rice cakes, maple syrup, firm unspotted bananas are a few examples. So in terms of fueling specifically, the night before my long run workout, so typically Saturday night when I know I'm going to be going on a long run the next morning, I'll have a low FODMAP meal that isn't too high in fiber and sort of moderate fat. It doesn't need to be low fat because it's farther away from training, but I wouldn't keep it high fat because I don't want to be getting urgent movements the next morning. So an example for me would be brown rice pasta and a cooked potato, plus some chicken, egg, and a little bit of cooked low FODMAP vegetables like broccoli and carrots, for example, and a little bit of additional olive oil and some Parmesan on that. And for breakfast before my long run workouts, so the next morning, I like to include some low FODMAP protein, such as in the form of protein shake, and then some easy digesting low FODMAP carbs like a gluten-free bagel, oatmeal, or quinoa. And I have a few combinations that I know are tried and tested and I know feel great on my gut to get me through the session fueled. And those are also going to be what I'll be doing for that race day on April 12th, because I know exactly what feels good to have the night before and what feels good the morning of. So part of that is practicing that as well as incorporating those three components: low FODMAP, low fat, and low fiber. The second component of nutrition strategies is gut training. So gut training means specifically challenging the gut, both the stomach and the gastrointestinal tract, with a higher content and volume of carbohydrates and fluids during exercise. So let's break down this a little further. There are essentially two main areas to focus on with gut training, if this is something that you're thinking about incorporating, and something that I do as well. So the first is known as gastric emptying. The first barrier for delivering exogenous carbohydrates, aka outside the body carbohydrates and fluids to the blood and ultimately the working muscles that are working hard during exercise, is your stomach. So you take in food, and really the first area that there may be some delivery is in your stomach or absorption. And the stomach is really the gatekeeper between your small intestine, and the rate of gastric emptying or stomach emptying will deliver fluid and nutrient delivery to the intestine. So endurance athletes, if this sounds like you, maybe you've done races before, run marathon or half marathon, and you've tried to drink during your race, you may have complained that you feel like liquid is sloshing around in your stomach, or even if you try to drink enough to keep up with your sweat rate during a longer run, you just feel like heavy and like that fluid is sloshing around in your stomach. So this is sort of interesting, and this is a common complaint. But we do know that the stomach wall can actually stretch over time with increase in volume of fluids, and it may allow for greater space of fluids. So we can kind of take this lesson away from competitive eaters who often, when they're on their in season, they will train for multiple weeks in a row and have multiple events where they try to stuff more food into their stomach. And over time, it gets easier for them to eat more. So they're essentially training their stomach. So how do we apply this to running specifically? So training with large volumes of fluids during exercise over time can improve that discomfort. So something that I have been doing during my long runs is taking in more fluids when I'm out running so that I'm able to feel better during race day and be able to drink enough at the aid station so that I can maintain hydration status, which is important too. I haven't mentioned it yet, but dehydrating yourself or being dehydrated is a trigger for diarrhea and loose stool and cramping. So we want to make sure we are staying hydrated during those harder efforts. The second aspect of gut training is known as intestinal transport. So once contents are emptied from the stomach, most fluid and sugar transport will take place in the duodenum, which is like the first area of your small bowel, and the jejunum, which is the second. And glucose and galactose, which are our two main simple sugars, aka just sugar, are transported across the enterocyte, or also known as the intestinal cell, walls through a transporter known as SGLT1, or sodium-dependent glucose transporter 1. And absorption of another sugar known as fructose, which you're probably familiar with, it takes place through GLUT5, which is not sodium dependent, and it is highly dependent on fructose. So we do know that our guts can handle roughly about 60 grams of glucose per hour. Over this, those transporters, or that SGLT1, do become saturated, and it's hard for them to take in more. So that's why we say about 60 grams per hour might be the upper limit for most people if you're not used to taking in carbs or sugar during your training. But because fructose is independent, the combination of glucose and fructose can result in higher exogenous rates. So we may be able to actually absorb up to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour during our endurance training, like a long run or running a marathon, if we're combining glucose to fructose in a 2-to-1 ratio. So I haven't alluded to it yet, but for those of you listening that haven't trained for a half marathon or a full marathon, it is very important to take in carbohydrates at sessions that are 75 to 90 minutes or longer, because past this point, we can run out of what's known as our stored carbohydrate fuel, known as glycogen, and lead to something called bonking, where we essentially run out of fuel, and it's very hard to recover from that, and it can totally sabotage a race. So we want to make sure that we start taking in carbohydrates during those longer efforts. Most people start, say, around the 30 to 40 minute mark and taking in enough carbohydrates per hour so that we're keeping our stores topped up and we're able to continue running at a consistent pace and not run out of fuel. So most people really, when they get into it, may start around 30 grams per hour and then even train their gut to get up to 60 and then even push past that. So we have some elite athletes now that are even getting to 100 and 110 grams of carbs per hour. Going back to what I said, is it may be due to this aspect of gut training. So can we train the gut to absorb even more than that 90 grams of carbs per hour? So interestingly enough, based on a few studies and also what's happening in practice, the answer is yes. So we may be able to even encourage our transporters to help take in more carbohydrates during exercise. And this can be done even between over 6 to 10 weeks of sessions. So something that I have been practicing as well is taking in more carbohydrates per hour and seeing how much my gut can handle and trying to take in more so that I can fuel well on race day and not get those gut issues. I try to take in a mix of both some real food and gels during my more training runs, but for the race I will be explicitly taking in gels, but I'm also keeping these options lower FODMAP and aiming for that 2-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio. So I do like to combine things like pitted dates, certain baby foods with lower FODMAP fruits, as well as some gels. I like UCAN, Martin, and Brix or Endurance Tap, which are maple syrup based. And I usually do a combination of those. So on my last long run, I got to about 50 grams of carbs per hour, or about 110 grams of carbs over a roughly 2.5 hour long run. And for the race, I will be using gels explicitly just because they are easier to take in at a faster pace than chewing something like a date. But I do like the dates or some of the baby food for my training just because it's a little bit cheaper and easier on the budget. And I know that I can handle it well, and I've trained with it too. And then the third components, so we've talked about the 3 Fs, FODMAPs, fat and fiber. We've talked now about the aspect of gut training and why that is important. The next area that we'll chat about is really prioritizing intestinal barrier and microbiome health. So years ago, I did struggle with IBS type symptoms like constipation, bloating, and discomfort, but this really has been a thing of the past for me for a long time. So like anyone, it is normal to have some, occasional changes in digestion. Sometimes when we travel, we experience a little bit of constipation, or, once in a while, I will have maybe a little bit of a richer meal when I eat out at a restaurant, or have a larger amount of garlic or certain FODMAPs that I know do bother me, and have some changes in digestion. But for the most part, day to day, I virtually have no bloating, very regular system. I go to the bathroom very regularly, have no skin issues, no immune issues. So definitely gut health is in a good shape. But this is something that I do think is important, and I continue to prioritize. And I also talk about with my athletes as well. So there isn't any direct research, that improving our microbiome health specifically will help inherently reduce GI symptoms during training. However, as I mentioned before, we do know that pre-existing GI or gastrointestinal conditions like IBS, IBD, and GERD do increase the risk of exercise-induced GI symptoms. And these conditions do involve microbiome balances. We know at the heart of IBS is typically dysbiosis or an imbalance in the gut microbiome. And it's thought that that can play a role in IBD as well. And even a small body of research suggests that probiotic supplementation may help reduce GI effects in athletes. So I definitely think that more research is needed to show a connection between overall gut health and exercise-induced GI conditions. But that said, I think that there's enough to say here that supporting a very resilient gut microbiome, making sure that our intestinal wall is healthy and it's free from any damage or small perforations in it, and keeping that intestinal barrier really healthy may help us to reduce those symptoms come race day or come that hard training. So a way that I prioritize this is make sure that I eat a very high fiber, plant diverse diet and whole food focused diet away from my harder workouts and runs, which is prioritized there. I work out a lot, so I can't do it before every run or workout, but I try to make sure that I'm getting in high fiber, plant-based foods away from my hard runs and workouts specifically. I aim for roughly, I get around 45 to 60 grams of fiber per day. I would say average is probably 55 grams per day, which is quite a lot. And I prioritize a lot of whole foods. I seldom drink alcohol. I try not to use any medications that may damage the gut barrier, and just including a lot of things like fermented foods and real foods and fiber to make sure that my gut stays as strong as possible, and definitely getting enough protein day to day to make sure my body has the building blocks to recover from exercise as well as repair tissues like intestinal tissues. So this helps me, I think, to reduce GI distress during those hard runs or races, because my gut is better equipped to deal with the natural inflammation and permeability that occurs during that high intensity and prolonged training, like running a marathon. And then the fourth aspect is eating more as mileage increases. So hands down, more activity equals more fuel required. And endurance training specifically requires a lot of carbohydrates. So if you aren't eating enough to support the demands of exercise, this can lead to something known as low energy availability, which can also turn into REDS, or relative energy deficiency syndrome. So LEA, or low energy availability, essentially means having a lack of fuel around your training or to support your workouts. And this is more a day-to-day or can be on an acute basis. So maybe it means going out for a run in the morning and then you don't eat a meal for 4 or 5 hours longer, and you essentially do it training fasted. And that can be pretty harsh on your body and can, over time, when done consistently, result in some cumulative stress and impaired recovery. And as I mentioned, over time, this can progress to REDS, or relative energy deficiency syndrome, which can lead to a cluster of symptoms, including blood loss, even menstrual period loss for females, low mood, and yes, digestive symptoms like constipation, bloating, and diarrhea. So for those of you watching, you can see I've put up on the screen just an example of all the different symptoms of relative energy deficiency in sport. If you are curious about this, I would encourage you to go back to a past episode that I did with another dietitian where we talked about low energy availability and whether it may be harming or wrecking your gut. So I definitely encourage you to go back to that, and I will link it below in the show notes so you can check it out as well. For me specifically, I make sure that I continue to increase carbs, and I also keep protein high. I do like to eat a higher protein diet because I do a lot of strength training too, to make sure that I'm recovering well and preventing those low energy availability and supporting hormones that can support both recovery as well as GI function. I don't track my food every day, but occasionally I will check in on my energy intake using a nutrition tracking app and make sure that I'm eating enough on higher volume days to support that recovery. I also love using weekly grocery delivery. For those of you in the Ontario area, I'm not sponsored, but I love Tradish, which is a grocery delivery service that sources local small distributors, and they aim to get a lot of Canadian produce and brands. And they're really amazing because they just help me create more of a routine around grocery shopping and making sure that I have all my staples in stock. I always get my deliveries for Saturday. It's a grocery delivery, so you can pick exactly what you want. It's not like a set box, but their main goal is to make healthy food more accessible, and they cut out the middleman, aka the grocery store. So their foods are actually cheaper than most stores, and they're really, really affordable. So definitely check out Tradish if you're in the Ontario area. Like I said, they help me get in more variety and get in my staples and make sure that I have everything delivered that I need. So that goes through the nutrition aspect of things and what I do, and also how I help clients as well. I'll mention just a couple other recovery tools because I think they are important and they help with both gut-brain connection, so gastrointestinal health, as well as recovery and preventing injury. So one is definitely sleeping. I do try to prioritize 8 hours of sleep per night. And if it's possible, even 1 or 2 nights a week, I'll try to get 10 hours, usually after the long run day when I do need more recovery time. And I would really say, like, forget the fancy recovery tools, the expensive like recovery boots or red light therapy, all that. Good sleep is probably the most effective and probably lowest cost tool to enhance your recovery. Super important. And we know that it's great for digestive health too. And something I love to use, I've gotten it recently, is actually a sunlight alarm. So I can set it for a specific time and it'll gradually like bring light into my room, and then it has this little song with like birds chirping. So it's a very calming wake up, and I like that to help wake up in the morning. And then at night, I do like to turn off heat in my condo so that the temperature goes down. I use a weighted cooling blanket to sleep, as well as an eye mask and earplugs to shut out any noise and light. And this really helps me to get good sleep quality. The other thing that I have incorporated now for about 1.5 years is hot yoga. Once per week, with a few exceptions here and there because of travel, but this has been another really great one as well. So as I mentioned earlier, getting feet out of socks is really important. When I'm strength training, I like to take shoes off to keep feet and ankles strong. And then I also like the aspect of hot yoga because it is a bit of heat training. So getting used to being in the heat. Heat and altitude change can also induce exercise GI symptoms. So I find that this also helps me in maybe those hotter days, or if I'm preparing for a hotter race, to do some exercise in a hot room to get a little bit of heat adaptation too. So now that I've walked you through the training balance, the nutrition strategies, as well as some other recovery tools, I do want to share something with you that I think will be a total game changer if you are an active individual who deals with these gut issues. during your strength workouts and running, or you just want to perform and recover better from your workouts. So I do get a lot of questions, obviously, from clients and community members about what to eat during and around workouts, especially when trying to avoid those flare-ups, bloating, and cranky tummy that can really derail a hard session. And that's exactly why I created my pre and post workout for a happy gut mini course and resource bundle. So inside this, I walk you through how to fuel before a workout so that your body has enough energy but your gut stays calm, what to eat or what to take in during those longer sessions from both carbohydrates as well as fluids and electrolytes to avoid bonking and digestive distress, and how to recover after workouts with gut-friendly, nutrient-rich meals that support your energy, repair, and immunity. And within this, we've got practical resources and education to help you to create a sustainable and an evidence-based plan that's going to work for you and help you fuel properly before, during, and after those sessions. So it's perfect for anyone chasing those performance goals, whether you're training for your first half marathon or full marathon, or just trying to feel better before, during, and after your workouts. And here's the best part. You don't have to figure it out alone. So I give you step-by-step guidance, sample meal ideas, snack lists, etc., that are low FODMAP and tummy friendly. So bringing in the principles that I mentioned today so that you can actually enjoy your training while keeping your gut happy. So if this sounds like something you've been looking for, you can get instant access today. Check out the link below in the show notes. It'll take you to that mini course and resource bundle so that you can start feeling smarter, performing better, and recovering faster without the gut drama. And trust me, the right nutrition around your workouts isn't nice to have. It is a total game changer for energy, recovery, and long-term gut health. And I hope to see you on the inside, and your gut and your body will thank you. So just to wrap things up here in today's episode, as you can see, keeping your gut happy during training isn't about like one magic food or one magic supplement. It's really about respecting and understanding the physiological demands of endurance training. So for me, this training block isn't just about chasing a specific time necessarily in Milan. It's about building that durability, both metabolically, mechanically, as well as digestively. So we walked through the importance of fueling adequately and increasing fuel as mileage increases, managing fiber strategically, and supporting a healthy gut microbiome while still supporting the demands of training. Practicing race day nutrition and gut training in advance makes a huge difference. Prioritizing recovery, as well as having a balanced training and making sure that you are recovering well and not putting extra stress on your system that can impact both your injury risk, but also your digestion. And these are really the same principles that I teach clients in my coaching program. And you really shouldn't have to choose between performance and digestive discomfort. You can train hard, fuel well, and support your gut at the same time. So if you are listening to this and you're currently training for a upcoming race, running race, and you're struggling with digestive symptoms, or you feel unsure about how to structure your fueling as mileage increases while also navigating gut issues or even a condition like IBS specifically, I would love to work together. So I do work with clients one-on-one. In my coaching programs, I have one specifically for IBS and gut health, and then I have another one for active individuals looking to fuel their performance while also navigating mild gut issues. So if you are interested for one-on-one support, I would love to work together. I will include a link in the show notes to apply for one-on-one coaching. And in that application, you can share more about your current goals. And then we will set up a free 30-minute clarity call to chat more about your goals and whether it's a good fit to work together and which of my coaching programs or services would be the best fit for you. So if you're really looking to understand exactly what you need for your body, have a partner in your health and fueling, and really nail your next race performance, I would love to work together. And I can't wait to see your application come through. So again, you can apply for one-on-one coaching if you're looking for high-touch, personalized support for your fueling and navigating gut symptoms from the show notes. As always, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a training partner, send it to a runner who's also always scouting bathroom stops, or even share it on Instagram and let me know what stood out to you. And I'll keep you posted on how this build progresses, and we'll do a follow-up episode on how race day unfolds. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you over in the next episode.